Welcome back. All right, so I wanted to discuss this today because I've been doing some list videos. The list videos will continue. At some point this summer, I will also be ranking who I feel right now are the best forwards in the game, the best defensemen in the game, and the best goaltenders in the game. And it'll just be my opinion based on statistics, based on what I watched this past year, based on various analytics as well. I will definitely take a look at all that, put it together, make a list, put the list out there, and I understand that that is something that if somebody else did that list, it's going to be very different. It's kind of a fun thing. But the debate of who the best player is in the game is always an interesting one. So I'm going to say straight off the top, I still think Connor McDavid is the most talented player in the National Hockey League on his own. And that's the thing, right? At times, McDavid has been kind of on his own if you look at some of the wingers he's had over the years. And he's done a good job of it. But I wanted to look at some players who might be in that conversation of who the best player in the game is. And we can get into some other parts of the debate too. Because I think that it's not one that has a right or a wrong answer. I think it's one that your opinion may be based on certain factors that my opinion is not based on, and I may use certain factors you may not use. So we'll look at some players on the board. I put Kucherov on the board because he recorded 1.55 points per game. At times, there's been discussions of him basically dragging the Tampa Bay Lightning along offensively. That you look at the drop-off from the amount of points he has to the amount of points number 2 on the team has, and it's a pretty dramatic drop. With the number of assists he has, I've always kind of looked at it as, yes, there's that drop between first and second place, but he's got some pretty good line mates when it comes to goal scoring. And so that's a factor, and that's the thing, is for any point that someone makes, there is a counterpoint. And so for me with Kucherov, is he the best winger in the game? Probably, yeah. I think Kucherov may very well be the best winger in the game, although Pastrnak for me would be up there too. But I try to make sure bias isn't taking any kind of, root in my brain or anything, because I like the Bruins, so there's the possibility that it's there. And I know that, and I've always done my best on this channel to weed that out where I can. Draisaitl, 1.49 points per game this past season, and in terms of points, going all the way back to 2020, 2021, he is second in the National Hockey League in points with 534. And there are times where I talk about McDavid being, I believe, the best player in the game, and then the comment will be, well, he plays with Draisaitl. At times he does, at times he doesn't. Depends on the coach and the situation. And putting them on the line together, I don't think diminishes any one or the other's abilities. But I understand where people are going with that. For me, Draisaitl, I would put him as a top 5, but I would not put him on that same level as McDavid. Even though this season, McDavid recorded 1.49 points per game. But are points the best standard? We always talk about, this defenseman won the Norris just because of the points, and I don't think that's fair. Well, does that mean the best forward is the one that gets the most points? So, that's the thing, right? You can have forwards that don't necessarily get as many points as the other guy, but maybe he's doing the things that slow that other guy down, right? So, for McDavid, he's had the most points in the game from 2020, 2021 until now with 613. 1.7 points per game overall over that 5-season period. Ridiculous numbers. 414 assists in that time period as well in 361 games. So Connor McDavid puts up ridiculous amounts of points, but there will definitely be some who say, however, Barkov shuts him down in the Stanley Cup final. And so therefore that makes Barkov a better player than McDavid. And that's something that you can make that argument. I can understand that argument. I can also understand people who disagree with that argument, that Barkov being able to shut down McDavid doesn't mean McDavid isn't, the best, most talented player. But I understand. And then the other argument could be, hey, the Panthers won the Stanley Cup, and so Barkov's part of that team, and it might make Barkov look a little better. And that's where people would say, hey, but Barkov was good before the Panthers were good, and that's where the back and forth gets into it. And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. One thing that's not on the board is name of a goaltender, because can a goaltender be the best player in the game has been a debate for a while. And since goaltenders don't play more than, 50, 55 games now, if you're higher than that. Now, we've seen Connor Hellebuyck win the Hart this year, but if I put Hellebuck's name on the board, what's the first thing somebody's going to say? And then what happened in the playoffs? And that's not an invalid argument. It's not an invalid argument to ask, well, what happened in the playoffs? With a goaltender, it makes some sense. With a forward and defenseman, I think there's more leeway there. But yeah, Hellebuck's numbers not fantastic in the playoffs, but during the regular season, he was amazing. He wins trophies that way. And I think it's a legitimate question of, can a goaltender be the best player in the National Hockey League? At certain points, I would argue the only one that I would say over my time watching hockey would say, you know what, he was the best player in the game for that period of time, Hasek. Now, I've had that opinion that Patrick Roy is the best goaltender that I've watched in my time watching hockey. I still have that opinion, but for a couple of seasons there, Hasek was the best player in the game, I thought, period. And Buffalo would have been outside of the playoffs and just not a strong record, but Hasek was the best player in the game. So that's where I think there can be a debate, and maybe, yes, in my opinion, a goaltender could be the best player in the game, but you have to be so amazingly good and play so well for so many games. So it is tough. I think it's tougher for a goaltender. Nathan MacKinnon has to be on the board because he had 1.47 points per game, and the McKinnon-McDavid argument has been out there in that McDavid won a Stanley, or did not win a Stanley Cup. MacKinnon won a Stanley Cup. It's interesting because I almost wrote MacKinnon next to the Oilers. No. McDavid, so me mixing the two up during the video, right on point. But yeah, MacKinnon, I almost did it again. MacKinnon has a Stanley Cup ring, McDavid does not. So that is something people will argue. And MacKinnon's playoff numbers have been excellent as well. It's not like he's been a slouch in the playoffs. I do remember before Colorado won the Stanley Cup, certain fans blaming the player Nathan MacKinnon for that lack of a Stanley Cup, which I thought was crazy because he would score in every single game and then he'd get shut down for a game and they'd get eliminated from the playoffs. And people go, see, MacKinnon's not good enough. Are you kidding? And so that's where the team aspect comes in. That you're going to have off nights, even the best players in the game. Can your team bail you out? And if the answer's no, then is that damning of the player that the team can't bail him out? Does it not show just how dominant that player is, that if he doesn't score, that team doesn't win? And so this, again, leaves that open, doesn't it? Cale Makar, Norris Trophy winner, 25 minutes and 43 seconds per game this past season, third. First on that list was Werenski. I did not put Werenski on the board for a simple reason that Werenski had an excellent season. I'm not taking anything away from him, but he needs to show again this coming season. If he can keep that up, he will be on the board the next time I have this type of discussion, if I ever make a video like this again. But Makar gets discussed a lot, and rightfully so. He is putting up points at a rate that evokes names like Orr, Coffey, some of the best offensive defensemen in history of the game. Although those that watch Bobby Orr play will tell you he was excellent defensively as well. Which shows that, yes, sometimes the best points-producing defenseman can be the best defenseman as well. It does happen. Quinn Hughes played 25 minutes and 44 seconds per game. He was second in the NHL. He was third in the Norris vote. And this is that debate, right? Makar versus Hughes, to which Columbus fans go, hey, our guy was in there too. He was second in Norris voting, and noted. But there is that discussion, and of course with Quinn Hughes, as a Canuck fan, you would know that when Hughes is on the ice, the Canucks are one team, and when he's off the ice, they're not that team. So that's something that Canuck fans would note from having seen their games, whereas if you don't watch the Canucks games as much as a Canuck fan does, you may not be aware that when Quinn Hughes is on the puck and he's playing, the Canucks numbers are that much better. And that's where the analytics comes in, with the analytics tells you the Canucks are a much better team with Quinn Hughes on the ice. And then people will use analytics to kind of knock down Makar and say, hey, Makar plays really well with MacKinnon. And then people will answer with, or does MacKinnon play really well with Makar? Both opinions are valid because it's one of those, it's a feeling. It's that subjective feeling, opinion. And then Matthews is on the board because he's had 243 goals in the National Hockey League since 2020, 2021. He leads in that category. Draisaitl is second with 231. And so does goal scoring make you the best player? I would say no. But we know that Ovechkin and his legend is because he's the number one goal scorer in the history of the game. So since Matthews has 243 goals, which is the most over the last 5 years, it at least gets him into that conversation. Plus, and I know people have varying opinions on him defensively, I think Matthews is good defensively. I think Matthews comes back checks well, he intercepts pucks. I think he's good on the defensive side of things. So there is an argument to be made that maybe Matthews, maybe because of the team he plays on, it's part of the reason he gets the level of scrutiny he does, but I'm kind of spoiling that part of the list, aren't I? Because there are factors, so I'll go through the factors first since I've already spoiled it. Ice time. Ice time, there are players in the league who put up really good numbers when they play fewer minutes. That's considered to be sheltered minutes. Sometimes players will be put out on the ice in certain situations, whether it's defensive zone faceoffs, offensive zone faceoffs, situations where a coach trusts them and maybe he doesn't trust them in other situations. This is why people bring up how some players don't kill penalties, some players do, some players are on the power play, some are not, and it sometimes being on the power play is seen as, well, that they get all their points on the power play rather than this guy's excellent on the power play. So that's that difference right there, right? Of, well, he's one of the best players because look what he can do on the power play, and then the counter being, well, yeah, but he only does that on the power play. 5-on-5, he can't do that. And 5-on-5 play is seen as being the best way of measuring things, and I understand that, but I've always believed that the goals that they score on the power play are just as important as 5-on-5, even though during the playoffs we do usually see a drop-off in the number of penalties being called. Power play goals are still goals. Line mates. Line mates get used to both knock a player down and talk a player up. He scores without good line mates. Well, he doesn't score, but he needs better line mates, so that's why he's not scoring. Well, yeah, I mean, look at the team he's on. He's on that team, so of course he's going to be a big scorer. Well, he's a scorer, but he's on a bad team, so if he was on a good team, he'd score less. And it's all back and forth. And sometimes it does sound like people contradict themselves here and there, which is there's always that somewhat of a bias. Maybe you think the best player in the game is a player because he's your favorite player, and that's okay. That's fine. I have always appreciated players who aren't necessarily the big stars in the game. I've always appreciated the guys who have to work harder to get that ice time. The guys who maybe they're in the AHL because they're on the shorter side of things. The guys who proved themselves last year and now they need to get a tryout to get a contract because they got to prove themselves all over again. I will always rally behind those players, probably ahead of some of these star players. Coaching. There are definitely players who put up good numbers and they'll say, well, he plays well under this system. Or vice versa, where it's he's not putting up good numbers. Well, it's because look at who the coach is. Because of that, they're not going to be able to be productive. Sometimes that's true. Sometimes it's not, and there's obviously room for some gray area in the middle there. So there's always going to be that level of bias. I do my best to take that level of bias out. It's part of the reason why when the regular season's on, I watch every game. I try to watch every team equally. Doesn't matter if, there's this really big Canuck game coming up and I'm really excited about it. If there's 8 games that night, I will watch each game equally. I might get more excited during the parts I'm watching of the Canuck game, depending on what's going on. But I will try to make sure that I'm still rooting through going through each game and trying to make sure that I'm following everything equally. So at the end of the night, when I do a review for all you fine people on the internet, I'm presenting it where I've watched each game equally and I can discuss each game equally. So analytics versus the eye test has been a debate since before this channel was in existence. And analytics have been adopted more and more by teams over the last, I would say, 5-6 years especially. Every team now has an analytics department. There's a reason that the Capitals bought Cap Friendly. There's a reason that at some point in time an NHL team's going to go, hey, Puckpedia, you guys have got this really great database you've built up now. How much would it cost to buy it? There's going to be a day where that happens because analytics are seen as this big deal. I use MoneyPuck. I know people use others as well. I've looked at various analytics sites and gone through other analytics sites and used them at times because there are things that maybe we don't pick up. There are things that you're not going to see as much of. And when it's a full season of a player having a good season analytically, it's worth looking at. And sometimes those are driven by teammates. They can be driven by coaching. Sometimes a player just has an off year or a great year and everything's bouncing their way. And then the eye test, which gets slammed a lot. But I honestly have found that very often the players you like with the eye test will work out analytically. That's usually when they're saying, well, analytically, these are the best players. And you look and you go, yeah, those guys are paid really, really well. And they're star players. They're fantastic players. It is unusual that a player will be excellent analytically and they're not paid very well. They have a hard time getting a contract. And we as fans go, oh, I had no idea he was good. So there's definitely a crossover between the two. And then looking at how the players viewed things. And I always find this interesting because fans will argue that, well, yeah, but the players don't necessarily see things the way that we do as fans. But I trust players. When players say who the best are, I do kind of think, okay, so they may very well be right. Sometimes there may be some bias built in there too, right? So the players this year ranked McDavid as the best forward. Vasilevsky is the best goalie. This is that NHLPA poll that they had during the season. Makar, they named best defenseman. Sidney Crosby, they said, is the most complete player. Kucherov, the best playmaker in the NHL. Crosby, the smartest player in the NHL. So most complete and smartest player for Crosby. I don't have him on the board because points-wise, he was not at the top. But if Crosby is still the most complete player and smartest player in the National Hockey League, should he have been more considered for the Hart Trophy? This is why I think if we had all these trophies voted on by players, we could have very different results. And I don't know that that would make them any less accurate. I'm doing air quotes for accurate because it would really depend on what your opinion is and everybody else's and that kind of thing. But I do think that if the players voted on all these awards, we could see very different winners. We'd see some that stays the same. Obviously, Makar is the best defenseman. He won the Norris Trophy. But Crosby would probably be higher in Hart voting. And then McDavid was voted best skater. So McDavid's the best forward in the game and he's the best skater. Crosby's the most complete player and the smartest player. So, but based on whatever you think the criteria should be for the best player in the game, the number one player in the National Hockey League, you can prove or disprove whatever. And it's one of the fun things. I enjoy this about sports. As somebody who loves to make lists all the time for everything, and currently my jersey list is it's a long list. I'm just telling people this could go on for a while because I've had people commenting for years on, oh, you didn't have this one and where's this one? All right, it's comprehensive. We'll just count down everything, but at least almost everything. But when it comes to best player in the game, I would lean towards McDavid. Understanding the Florida Panthers won the Stanley Cup, understanding that there's other Florida Panthers you could put on the board here. I would argue the Florida Panthers are the best overall cohesive unit and team in the National Hockey League. I think they still have that, even with the offseason that we've seen, because they've kept basically everybody, and I think there is an argument to be made for Barkov as potentially the best player in the game. I also think there's an argument to be made for other players. And it's the arguments that keep us here, isn't it? All right, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below as to what criteria you use to decide on who the best player is. And for me, I don't use Stanley Cups to prove or disprove because there's a lot of players who win Stanley Cups that I wouldn't necessarily put as the best players. And there are times that even some of the best players win Stanley Cups, but they're not like a key reason that team won the Stanley Cup. So it really is just a matter of what the criteria is that you use versus what I use. Let me know your thoughts. Hit like and subscribe if you've not done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support. I will talk to you again soon.